You don't have to come for Christmas. If you do, we may not open the door." That's what my mother said, after I'd quietly paid their mortgage for 7 years. I wasn't disinvited because I hurt them. I was erased because I made life too easy for them. And when I finally stopped paying, their silence started making sense. I'm Claire, a hospice nurse who spent a decade holding other people's hands while mine went unnoticed. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story will remind you. You don't have to yell to be heard. You just have to stop funding the silence. They never apologized. But when I opened the trust letter they tried to hide from me, I realized I wasn't just excluded. I was the rightful heir. And I still let it go. Watch this now, because if you've been quietly carrying everyone else's weight, it might be time to set it down before they forget who's been holding it all. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. The night air clung to my coat as I shut the apartment door behind me, drops of melted snow trailing across the entry rug. I tugged off my boots, half-frozen laces snapping against the tile, and breathed in the faint mix of peppermint oil and lavender balm I kept burning whenever a patient's ache lingered on my clothes. In the corner, the thrift store tree winked its quiet string of colored bulbs, casting soft flashes over 3 neat parcels by the door. Dad's jar of orange marmalade, Mom's wool socks, a tea sampler ribboned in gold. They waited there every year, even when no one asked. The phone buzzed. Ethan's name filled the screen. I smiled before my mind caught up, the way you smile at an old photograph long after the memory has gone dull. "Hey, big brother," I answered, shrugging off my coat. On the other end, he cleared his throat, that drawn-out performing for Mom pause he never quite outgrew. "Claire, listen. Tessa's been working on boundaries, energy stuff." He let the words dangle, waiting for me to rescue him. "Uh-huh," I said, setting my lunchbox on the counter. "So we were thinking, maybe you skip Christmas this year, just so it's, peaceful." I was still forming an answer when my screen lit with Mom's number. Ethan vanished, replaced by her practiced warmth. "Sweetheart, you know we adore you," Mom began, each syllable wrapped like hard candy. "But Tessa is sensitive to heavy energy, and with your job and all that sorrow, well, if you come, it might be too much. If you show up, we may not open the door. You understand." It wasn't a question. The call ended. Snow hissed against the window like static. I stood beside the blinking tree, watching red, then green, then gold reflections shimmer against the glass, as though the room were still waiting for someone else to speak. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the strange stillness that follows a final verdict. All those years I had driven home with pies, balanced on the passenger seat, convincing myself a welcome could be earned through enough casseroles and clogged drains fixed. It startled me, how clearly I saw it now. I was never actually invited. I had just never been told I wasn't wanted until now. I crossed the room and lifted the laptop lid. The screen woke with its usual soft hum. An unread subject line sat near the top of my inbox. Monroe Family Trust. Reminder. Transfer pending. I clicked past it without thinking, fingers moving on memories older than my doubt. Not anger, instinct. Somewhere inside the whir of the fan and the distant hush of winter streets, something was shifting, and I was finally still enough to feel the ground move. I didn't cry. I didn't even boil the tea properly. I just started canceling things. The apartment had gone still in that midnight way only Vermont winters knew, like the world was holding its breath beneath 10 inches of hush. I sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop warm on my knees, a single beeswax candle flickering on the coffee table beside my old spiral-bound notebook, the same one I used for patient notes and grocery lists, now open to a fresh page that simply read, "Unpaid debts." I logged into the first account, Ethan's Creative Fund, $800 a month every month for almost 4 years. paint supplies, studio rent, emotional sabbaticals in Portland. I remembered when he asked for help, how small his voice had been when he said it would only be for 6 months. I clicked cancel recurring payment. The screen flickered like it had exhaled. Next, the mortgage autopay for Mom and Dad's house. I'd taken it over after Dad's back surgery. Not once had they mentioned it out loud, as if invisible help was easier to ignore. I deleted the routing instructions. My fingers didn't tremble. Family phone plan, gone. Truck insurance, gone. Vet plan for Tessa's cat, Tuna, gone. I closed tab after tab, watching the digital ties dissolve one by one. It wasn't anger driving me. It was the strange, clean silence that comes when you finally realize no one's coming to rescue you. And maybe, just maybe, you don't need them to. The Monroe Family Trust. Reminder, transfer pending email still blinked in the corner of my inbox. I didn't open it. Another notification pulsed beneath it. A missed call from Stern and Brody Trust Office. I ignored that too. I turned back to the notebook. Slowly, I listed the debts. Not financial ones, though some had dollar signs beside them. I wrote, Tessa's student loan cosign, $12,000. Wedding cake deposit for Ethan, never reimbursed. Mom's root canal, 2019. 150-month groceries for family cabin, since 2016. The list went on. I didn't even sigh. I finished, tore the page carefully along the spiral, folded it once, and placed it in a freezer bag. Slid it behind a bag of frozen peas like a letter to someone I was finally done writing. I lit a second candle, opened the tin of cinnamon apple tea, Mom's favorite, and brewed a cup. But I didn't wait for it to steep. I drank it warm, not hot, then cold. The flavor dimmed but didn't disappear. Release, I thought, is quiet. I didn't post a photo. I didn't explain. I simply didn't show up. And somehow, that was louder than anything I'd ever said. Christmas morning arrived without fanfare. No cinnamon rolls in the oven, no messages blinking from a family group chat. Just a soft gray light filtering through my curtains and the quiet hum of the radiator. I wrapped myself in a worn cardigan, poured a cup of ginger tea, and sat at the window. Outside, Montpelier was blanketed in white. The snow covered every path, every car, like nature herself was insisting on a clean slate. I didn't decorate. The little tree in the corner remained unplugged. I folded laundry instead, stacking towels with quiet purpose. I reread a passage in a novel I'd been slowly savoring. I lit a candle that smelled of cedar and orange peel. There was no rush, no sound but the occasional whisper of wind against glass. I thought of the hospice patients I'd sat with in their final days. Some of them passed on Christmas. They rarely spoke of regrets. Mostly they remembered scents, music, moments. Meanwhile, at the Monroe house, things cracked. Tessa noticed it first. She'd been walking through the living room, phone in hand, when she paused by a faded photograph half hidden behind a porcelain angel. A girl in a blue dress, hugging a muddy dog, hair windblown and laughing. My knees were scraped in the photo. The frame had dust around the edges. Tessa tilted her head and asked gently, "That's your sister, right?" Silence. Ethan fiddled with the firewood. Nancy said something about needing more tea. Jim adjusted his hearing aids but said nothing. Tessa didn't push. She just stepped back and later posted a photo from their back porch. It showed the snow-dusted pines under a heavy sky. The caption was brief. Sometimes families erase the very people who held them together. By early afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Messages poured in, some from old coworkers, some from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. "Is she talking about you? Wait, Ethan has a sister? Are you the hospice nurse she mentioned?" I turned off notifications. I wasn't interested in defending myself against something I hadn't done. My absence, it seemed, had exposed a presence they'd rather keep buried. Then a message from Tessa arrived, just one line. "You weren't there, but they're saying you ruined Christmas." I read it twice, then closed my phone and leaned back in my chair. The tea had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. Bitterness, I'd learned, could be sipped in silence. That's when the email arrived. From Ethan Monroe. Subject: let's reset things. Hey Claire, I think things got a little out of hand. Tessa's upset. This is affecting her energy and my work. Maybe you two could talk? Would be good to smooth this out. No apology. Just management. Just Ethan. I hovered over delete, but my hand didn't move. Instead, I clicked back to the blinking subject line from 2 days ago. Monroe Family Trust. Reminder, transfer pending. This time, I didn't ignore it. This time, I opened it. They showed up looking like a Norman Rockwell painting, with cookies, excuses, and practiced regret. It was just after 7, the evening air hushed by a fresh dusting of snow. I had turned off most of the lights, letting the soft amber glow from the kitchen spill into the hall. The radiator clicked and hummed. I was reading a book I couldn't quite follow when the knock came. Gentle, but deliberate. I knew who it was before I even moved. When I opened the door, it was only by an inch. There they stood, Nancy in her quilted coat, holding a red tin of sugar cookies wrapped with gold ribbon. Ethan, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly like a child unsure of his apology. Jim stood a step behind them, eyes downcast, hat clutched in one hand like he'd just come from church. Nancy's voice broke first. "Sweetheart, let's talk." Her words trembled just enough to sound real, but not enough to shake. The performance was familiar, the warmth that asks you to forget the chill. She reached out, but didn't cross the threshold. Ethan followed quickly. "You didn't have to go nuclear, Claire. We could have figured this out. Tessa's spiraling. You know how sensitive she is." He gave a half laugh, as if this were some sitcom script that had gone sideways. The scent of their perfume, their cold leather gloves, even the soft rustle of coats, it all felt like Christmases I used to hope would feel different. Jim said nothing. He didn't have to. His silence had always spoken louder than Nancy's carefully arranged compassion or Ethan's indirect guilt. But this time, when I began to close the door, he lifted his hand, resting it gently against the wood. His touch wasn't forceful. It was nostalgic, like he knew this would be the last time. I looked at each of them. Not long, just long enough. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm done." I didn't slam the door. I closed it slowly. They didn't knock again. I leaned against the wood once it latched. My hands weren't trembling. My breathing didn't stutter. Outside, footsteps crunched faintly in the snow as they walked back to their car. No raised voices, no dramatic pleads, just the final shuffle of something already frayed giving way. I returned to the kitchen, poured the last of the tea into my cup. The cinnamon had gone bitter. I didn't sweeten it. I sat down at the table and let the silence unfold like a blanket. And there it was. The envelope. The one from the trust office. Still unopened, though I'd cracked it halfway yesterday before folding it back up, like a truth I wasn't quite ready to see. This time, I unfolded the papers fully. There were lines I didn't understand, legal words, stamps, but one sentence stood out, circled in pale yellow from a prior correspondence. Primary beneficiary, Claire Monroe, contingent on independent filing before Dec 31, 2022. My breath caught, not from shock, but from the weight of timing. They had known, and still left me in the cold. I didn't cry. I read every word, then read it again. This wasn't about inheritance. It was about intention. Let the snow fall. Let their cookies go stale. I had opened the door, but this time, it was to something else entirely. I didn't need their version of forgiveness. I needed my version of truth. The morning sun reached through the window like it hadn't in weeks, melting patches of snow on the balcony rail. A thin line of steam curled up from my tea, carrying the faint scent of chamomile and something warmer. Maybe cinnamon, maybe relief. The apartment was quiet. No voicemails blinking, no knocks, no apologies rehearsed or otherwise. On the corner of my desk sat the envelope I'd moved 3 times this week. Tessa's handwriting was unmistakable, looped, Careful, kind. She had slipped the letter through the mail slot 2 days after Christmas. I hadn't opened it until now. Inside was a single page, thick stationery, floral edge. Her words were steady, unpolished. You reminded my grandmother she mattered. No one else spoke to her like you did, not even us. That night she passed. She said your name. You gave her dignity. You reminded me what that looks like. Thank you for that and for not pretending. I sat there a long time, not crying, just holding it. Then I stood up, dug around the drawer for some push pins, and framed the letter using an old clipboard. I hung it right above my desk, where I used to tape reminders to bring wine or pie to family dinners I was barely spoken to at. Below the frame sat the envelope from the trust office. I'd read it fully now, all of it. The final sentence still hit like a chord, unresolved. Beneficiary filing must be completed and co-signed no later than Dec 31, 2022. I printed the form, signed my name with a pen that stuttered once, then steadied. I placed it in a new envelope but didn't seal it. I let it rest on the counter like a thought I hadn't quite finished thinking. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Then another tone. This one different, softer, a name I hadn't seen in years. Hey Claire, it's Rachel from hospice, 2017 winter rotation. Just wanted to say, you're the reason I didn't quit that year. You probably don't remember, but you stayed late so I could cry without explaining. I never forgot that. I didn't respond right away. I just set the phone down, palm pressed over the screen, as if it could pass some of that warmth back through me. Later that morning, I opened my email again, deleted the thread of cousin messages unopened since Christmas Eve. I wasn't angry, just no longer available for that kind of forgetting. Then, just as I was getting up to make a second cup of tea, a new message landed. Subject, urgent. Legal deadlines approaching. Trust co-signature. I stared at it. Not in fear, not in confusion, just ready. Because sometimes the quietest steps forward are the ones no one else claps for, but they count just the same. I didn't burn it down. I just walked away holding the match I never struck. The air inside the notary's office was warmer than expected, rich with the scent of peppermint candies and old ledgers. A creaky ceiling fan spun slowly overhead, catching the low winter sun in slices that danced across the wooden counter. Claire stepped in quietly, shoulders straight, scarf loosened just enough to breathe. Mildred, the notary, white-haired and impossibly steady, looked up and offered a nod that didn't ask questions. Claire nodded back, sliding a manila envelope across the desk. The papers were already signed, dated, stapled with precision. All that remained was the stamp, the final mark of departure. Claire Monroe, Mildred confirmed, her voice soft but unmistakable. Release from Monroe Family Trust, irrevocable clause included. Claire said nothing. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge of the counter, steady but cold. Mildred reviewed the addendum silently. Then, my name and likeness shall not be used in any Monroe family estate, business, or press. Smart girl, Mildred murmured, setting her seal down with a clean final thud. It sounded like the closing of a chapter, not dramatic, just necessary. Claire thanked her with a nod, gathered the papers, and stepped back into the Vermont afternoon. Snow was falling in slow, sparse flakes, the kind that didn't rush to land. She walked past the cafe on Main Street without turning her head, though her peripheral vision caught the window display. The same tired reindeer figurines, the faux fireplace lit with orange bulbs. Once, years ago, she'd sat there with her parents, Ethan and Tessa, a scone on each plate and silence between them. She didn't stop. Her boots crunched over salted pavement as she turned the corner. The sky had softened to a washed-out gray, like everything in it was holding back. At home, she stepped into the warmth of her apartment and peeled off her gloves, one finger at a time. She lit a candle on the windowsill. The wax flickered gently, a small rebellion against the chill. She placed the signed documents on the table. Next to them sat her laptop, still open to the last email from the Monroe family's estate attorney. "Your silence will be appreciated. Please consider the public image of the family." Claire read the line once more, and this time she didn't feel bitterness, just distance. She clicked delete. The sound it made was barely audible, like the pop of air when a seal is broken. And maybe that's what this was, a seal, finally broken. Not to spill poison, but to let herself breathe. She poured tea, not the sweetened kind her mother preferred, not the organic brand Ethan once gave her in a gift basket with an apology note. Just plain cinnamon. Steeped strong, sharp on the tongue, she drank it slowly, each sip anchoring her to herself. She stood for a moment by the bookshelf and pulled down an old photo album. Inside, birthdays she planned but wasn't pictured in, family vacations she financed but hadn't attended. One photo still clung loosely to the page, a Thanksgiving dinner from 2015. She had set the table, baked the pies, bought the wine. But when it was posted online, her portion of the image had been cropped out. Caption, "Just family this year." Claire slid the photo into an envelope, labeled it quietly, "Keep for honesty," and placed it in the drawer beside her extra candles. She didn't need them to rewrite history. She just didn't want to be part of the false version they kept telling. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. New message from hospice admissions subject, re-intake request body. Patient asked for you by name. She froze for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. She wasn't erased everywhere. A small smile curved at the edge of her mouth, not the tight, polite kind she wore for her family. This one was real, tired, but rooted. She grabbed her coat, the same one she'd worn the day she walked out of their lives for good. Snow still fell in slow spirals, and the street lamp outside her window flickered on. Claire stepped out, not to run away, but to show up where she was needed. And this time, the silence wasn't exile. It was hers. I stood by the window that morning, candle flickering, tea in hand, and for the first time in years, I felt peace that didn't need permission. I hadn't raised my voice, but I'd finally been heard by the one person who mattered most, me. Sometimes, walking away isn't bitterness, it's clarity. When a family forgets how to hold space for you, saving yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. And the quietest goodbyes often echo the longest. If this story touched something in you, I invite you to share your thoughts below or simply carry its warmth into your own day. You're not alone.